At 5:57 a.m., February 13th, 2016, a young man called 911 from a Walmart parking lot. He was covered in blood, claimed he didn't know where he came from, and he didn't have shoes on. 20 minutes later, police would find his grandparents dead in their beds, beaten with a baseball bat. But that's where this story really begins. In February 2016, Branchburg, New Jersey was the kind of quiet suburban community where terrible things aren't supposed to happen there. The big bad stuff only happens in the big bad cities. It was the kind of place where 78-year-old Hungarian immigrants like Louis Simon Jr. could build a life as an engineer and inventor, holding multiple patents in recycled plastics. Louis arrived in America in 1956 with nothing but determination and mechanical brilliance that made him a pioneer in environmental engineering. His patents in recycled plastics technology were groundbreaking, converting plastic waste into usable construction materials decades before environmental consciousness became mainstream. Those who knew him called him a mechanical genius, but that underestimates his contribution to the American industry. He was self-employed because his vision was too advanced for most companies to understand. Betty, his wife, had her own remarkable story. A Brooklyn native and former Ford model who built a 21-year career at Verizon Wireless, she was also a CCD teacher who shared her faith with young people. Together, they created something beautiful. Their Branchburg home became the gathering place for a large extended family. Betty planned every holiday, remembered every birthday, and made sure nobody felt forgotten. They had earned their golden years, their quiet Saturday mornings, their cruise vacations. They had earned the right to feel safe in the home they had worked so hard to create. But on that cold February morning, their story ended in the most brutal way possible. At 5:57 a.m., Reddington Township Police received a 911 call that would haunt anyone who heard it. The caller was 20-year-old Ezra Simon Daniels, and he was calling from the parking lot of a Walmart on Route 22. The conversation was pretty bizarre. Ezra told the dispatcher he was shaking, had the car's seat heaters on, and when asked about his condition, he mentioned he had no shoes on, and there was blood on his feet. Not, "I'm hurt," or "I've been attacked." Something much stranger, something that suggested a complete disconnection from reality. Here's a part of that call.
You don't remember how you got there?
I have no idea, sir.
He said he was leaving from his grandmother's house at 115 Reddington Road. That's what he remembers last.
Well, I don't remember it. I just assume that's where I came from.
Okay, what is your name?
My name is Ezra.
And
The last thing I remember, I had pizza, and I was watching television, and I went to bed.
okay, and you're bleeding from where?
I'm not bleeding, I don't think, from anywhere I checked. But there's blood all over
All over what?
me, my legs, my feet, and my hands.
Okay, you don't. What is your last memory?
I was having pizza, and
Pizza where?
in the living room of my house.
Last memory
to bed.
was having pizza at his house and then went to bed. Do you think you took something that would have made you forget something? Have you been sick or?
The only thing I would have taken was a melatonin supplement the night before last.
Okay, when you look at yourself, like your face and stuff, do you see anything like broken or?
No, there's blood spattered on it.
You don't have shoes on.
I don't have any shoes.
And there's blood on your feet?
Yeah.
When officers arrived 18 minutes later, they found Ezra sitting in the driver's seat of a car, covered in blood but completely uninjured. Somerset County Prosecutor Jeffrey Soriano would later emphasize this critical detail: the blood wasn't his. Based on Ezra's 911 call, Reddington police contacted Branchburg officers to do a welfare check at the address that he had given them. When no one answered repeated knocks on the Simon home, officers entered the residence. What they found was unconscionable. Louis and Betty were dead in their bed, victims of what investigators called significant blunt force trauma to their heads. They had been attacked while they slept, in what should have been the safest place for them in the world. The murder weapon was still inside the house, an aluminum baseball bat. Here's what makes this even more devastating. Ezra wasn't some random intruder. He was their grandson, the young man they'd opened their home to, the family member they were trying to help. Louis and Betty were at an age where they could have been enjoying retirement without responsibility or raising another generation. Instead, they opened their home to their grandson, believing they could provide the stability he needed. They were the kind of grandparents who would never give up on family, even when family became challenging. The family's grief was compounded by media attention. Louis's obituary contained a handwritten note that speaks volumes. No press allowed at the funeral services. These were people who had to bury their loved ones while the world watched. The fact that they felt compelled to ban the media from the premises of the funeral tells us everything we need to know about how invasive the coverage had become. The Simon family had to navigate something unthinkable, mourning their murdered loved ones while grappling with the reality that the killer was also their family member. Betty was remembered for having a heart of gold. Louis was called wonderful and one of the best by colleagues. The tribute walls on their online obituaries were filled with messages from a shattered community. These were real people whose lives ended in unimaginable violence at the hands of someone who should have been protecting them. Ezra was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and third-degree possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose. Bail was set at $2 million cash only. By June 2016, he had been formally indicted by a Somerset County grand jury. But here's where the case becomes even more complex. Ezra claimed he had no memory of what happened that night, complete amnesia regarding the most violent act imaginable. He genuinely appeared to have no recollection of the events that led to his grandparents' death. This revelation forced the legal system to grapple with fundamental questions about criminal responsibility. In New Jersey, prosecutors must prove both the physical act and the mental state required for conviction. When a defendant claims complete memory loss, it creates unprecedented challenges for both prosecution and defense. Ezra underwent psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Martin Wineapple at Princeton, a process that would determine whether he was competent to stand trial and potentially lay groundwork for an insanity defense. Competency focuses on the defendant's present mental state. Can they understand the charges and assist in their own defense? An insanity defense focuses on their mental state at the time of the crime. Ezra was sent to the Anne Klein Forensic Center in Trenton for evaluation, a facility that specializes in these complex assessments. Cases involving complete memory loss present unique challenges. How do you assess someone's mental state during a time they claim to not remember? The legal proceedings in cases like this can stretch on for years. Competency hearings, psychiatric evaluations, and potential appeals create a labyrinth process that can leave families without closure. This explains why many cases involving psychiatric defenses disappear from public view. They're often resolved through plea agreements that avoid the uncertainty of trial. This case raises uncomfortable questions about mental health, family dynamics, and criminal responsibility. What happens in someone's mind to make them capable of such violence against people who love them? The answer came through years of psychiatric evaluations that revealed the devastating truth. Ezra was eventually declared incompetent to stand trial and diagnosed with schizophrenia. The murder charges were dismissed, but he was committed to Greystone State Psychiatric Hospital. By February 2021, a judge found that Ezra's complex and complete delusional system precludes meaningful interaction with his attorney. During one hearing, a psychiatrist testified that Ezra had told her a coyote told him to cut himself and spread his blood all over his face, walls, and mirror. And he had followed those instructions. These aren't the delusions of someone who chose to be violent. These are symptoms of someone whose brain chemistry had fundamentally broken down. For years, the public record seemed to vanish. Now we know why. Starting in 2021, Ezra filed appeals to be released from psychiatric commitment. In multiple hearings, psychiatrists testified that he was still experiencing hallucinations and remained dangerous. Even when claiming his medication was working, psychiatrists suspected that he wasn't taking it. When a judge ruled in 2022 that he should remain committed, Ezra interrupted, saying, "It's not fair. It wasn't my fault. I didn't do a damn thing wrong." Even years later, he couldn't grasp reality. A state appellate court rejected his appeals in 2023, and 27-year-old Ezra Simon Daniels remains at Greystone State Psychiatric Hospital. The radio silence in the case wasn't a system failure, it was the system working when mental illness and violent crime intersect. Louis and Betty weren't killed by someone who chose to hurt them. They were killed by their grandson, whose mind had been destroyed by schizophrenia, a disease that typically manifests in late teens and early 20s, exactly when Ezra was living with them. The signs were probably there, but early schizophrenia symptoms can look like normal teenage behavior. Louis and Betty probably thought they were dealing with a troubled young man who needed some guidance. They had no way of knowing they were living with someone whose brain was literally deteriorating. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Murder, bingeable true crime stories. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and if you're a new listener to this podcast, welcome in. So glad that you're here. Kick your shoes off, put your feet up, and get ready to binge away some true crime cases. But first, make sure you hit subscribe. Now, whether you're new or whether you're an OG listener, you can all go to the website 10minutemurder.com. I'm putting things there pretty often, and you can also contact me on the website. And here is one of those messages. Subject, podcast guest. Hi, Joe. If you could have a guest on 10-Minute Murder, anyone at all, who would you pick? Could be a famous author, a criminologist, or even a celebrity fan. That's from Sophie from Toronto. And Sophie, I'll tell you, that's a pretty no-brainer for me. I've mentioned on this podcast probably a half a dozen times how much I'm interested in the profiling aspect of the criminals, how they develop profiles to catch some of these killers. So I would have to say someone in the ilk of John Douglas and Robert Ressler, one of those FBI profiler types, just to come on and talk about the different cases they've covered, that they can talk about their process, things that surprised them, and things like that. I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know how I would condense that to 10 minutes though. I've thought about doing that, but I don't know that I could condense that to 10 minutes. I think it would be impossible, but it would be really interesting. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you again, Sophie, for the email. And if you want to send me an email, you can go to 10minutemurder.com. If you enjoyed the episode today, share it with your friends and family, and I'll see you next time.